Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and guests. This is April the 3rd, 2023, and this is a regular meeting of the West Shore Photography Club. I'm Dennis Baker, the president and your host. We have what should be a very interesting meeting scheduled for tonight with a question and answer panel discussion. But before we get to that, just a couple of business items. Number one is next week, no meeting. That's April the 10th, no meeting. April the 17th
And then the inside
is an image review.
Old-timey hay or straw in there to.
Okay, guys, we're getting a little talking in the background here. Let me mute a couple of people. Yeah, if you don't mind. Okay, that should do it. And then there we go. Thank you. April the 17th, image review. Chip Kane is going to be the reviewer. And we do have a theme for that meeting, and it was predicated upon the trip to the state capitol. It's architecture. So we figured at least the people that went to the state capitol would have plenty of examples of architecture. And even if you didn't go on that field trip, you should certainly be able to come up with some images, shoot new or from your files. So that means that the deadline for uploading your image to the club website will be Thursday, April the 13th, midnight, Thursday, April the 13th. Okay. Joe, I'll turn it over to you for trips information.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. We had a trip this past weekend to the Anderson Mill. We had 21 folks there. At least I think that we had 21 folks because folks came and went as the session went on. It was a glorious day for that. And we had nice weather. It rained all the way down, but as soon as we got there, it cleared up and it worked out really well. 21 people. That's like the fourth time I think we've been there. And our high was 41 people, 40 some people at one point, and we had 21 the other day.
What would you think of the Ryan building?
The what?
At the Capitol visit, the Ryan building?
Oh, the Ryan building. Yes, that was magnificent, the stairway. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. And we orchestrated it such that everybody had a clear shot of it for about 5 minutes. And then everybody then could wander around and get different shots from up above. It was very, very popular. It worked out real well. And the folks at the state capitol were really, really accommodating for us and arranged to have their Capitol official photographer photograph the whole group, which is now on the Facebook page as the banner image. And so that was really nice. They were very, very accommodating.
Oh, and tell them about Cheryl Dozier, including that in her newsletter.
Oh, yes. And
cool.
Cheryl Dozier, who is our representative here in this House of Representatives, had in her newsletter, which she puts out periodically, and we were featured in there and talked about the West Shore Photography Club and our visit that we had. And it was very, very nice. It was a nice little plug for us, so to speak. It was great. And we have a trip coming up this Saturday to the Kiwanis Lake. And Kurt, you're here. Kurt is going to be leading that. And also, Kurt, could you explain why we're going to be doing 2 trips to Kiwanis Lake?
Sure, Joe. Yeah, our first trip to Kiwanis Lake will be the birds in flight getting nesting material. And so you'll be able to get those shots. There will also be egrets there and black crown night herrings. I was there last week and there was 14 egrets already there, and there were 2 black crowns there. And then the next venture to Kiwanis Lake, that will have the chicks. They'll be born coming up in a few weeks, and then they will be about, say, 5-6 inches tall, high enough that they're above the edge of the nest, and we'll be able to get some nice shots of them feeding the chicks, which will be some good photo opportunities there.
Okay. Kurt, some members mentioned when we were down at the mill, that do they need a bazooka lens for photographing the birds at Kiwanis Lake? Can you address that? What kind of equipment they might need?
Yeah, you're not going to need a bazooka lens by any measure. Something, if you have a crop sensor, maybe something a 70 to 200, you're be at 200 millimeters. Maybe a 300 would work well. And if you have a full frame, probably somewhere 400 or 500 range would be really nice. They're big birds, so they're going to fill the frame of your camera. They're not small birds. So 300, 400, 500 would be full frame, and then your 200 to 500 would be on the long side for a crop sensor.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
Hey,
Thanks.
Joe.
Yes.
This is Don Uvick. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes,
I've
we
been
can hear
going-
you fine, Don.
Hi, I've been going several weeks to watch the great egrets. I was there just the other day, and they're up to about 18 or 19 now, and very, very active. Anytime, well, I know when we're going, but they've been very active with the nest building lately. I mean, it's just, I got a neck strain trying to take as many pictures as I did, because they were just leaving the nests, and another 2 or 3 would go off. And I tell you, and I agree with Kurt, any the lenses he recommended will do the job, and people will not be disappointed. I'm so happy you guys pointed this out to us. It's fantastic. That's all I had to say.
Okay, great. Thanks, Don. Appreciate that. Dennis, we have a trip coming up on the 22nd. Frederick, do you want to talk about that?
We do. This should be really cool. Cam Miller, who's a member of our club, but she's also the president of the Frederick Camera Click, is going to be leading the trip. The historic district of Frederick is really a neat area with lots of things to photograph, and a creek that runs right through the middle, lots of shops and restaurants and so forth. So it should be a very interesting day, and she knows the area very, very well. She's led numerous walks for her group through the area. So I think we'll get information out, but I think that's starting at 10 o'clock on Saturday, April the 22nd. So that should be a neat trip.
Okay, great. And to round out the month of April, we have a trip on the 29th to Gerhardt Machinery, and Eve Smith and Mary Fox are going to be leading that. And Eve is sort of our master for that particular trip. She's led every one with others. So Eve, want to give us a little bit of an idea of what we're going to see there? You're muted, Eve.
There we go.
Okay.
I guess I owe Mike $5 now, don't I? Yeah, so it's 8 acres of, you might want to call it like a Mack truck graveyard, but there's so much more than that. There's all kinds of parts of Mack trucks, whole into pieces, gears, rust galore, you name it, you'll find it. If it's got rust on it, it's an awesome. I've been there 4 times, and I find something different every time. It's I don't know, what is it, about less than an hour to get there, I think, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just park and walk, and doesn't matter how many there are of us, we don't get in each other's way because there's plenty of room. Just old machinery. It's an awesome site.
Okay, great. And what kind of lenses? Do you need like macro lenses for that, or what?
You don't. You can use a normal lens. You can use anything that you want. You can get up close to anything. You can shoot from far away. There's nothing in particular you need. You probably don't need a tripod. I never take one. Well, I might take one. I never use one. Good walking shoes, because it is outdoor. It's just a big open area. What else can I say about it? I know I don't use knee pads, but if you wanted knee pads or something to kneel on, I'll usually just take a little hand towel in case I need to wipe something down or sit on something or what have you. But it's more than just it's not, I wouldn't classify it as a junkyard, but if you can imagine the most awesome junkyard you'd ever go to, that might explain it also.
Okay, thanks, Eve. Okay, just one last comment. If anybody has any images of Anderson Mill, either from any of our trips that we've taken there, I would like you to email to me about 2 or 3 or 4 of them. We're the Anderson family, because Harry is getting up there in ages, would like to put together a little slideshow for him with family members, as well as some of the images we've taken of the mill. So if you could email them to me, I would really appreciate it. And just a few of them, and not a whole, don't dump the memory card on me type thing. And so that'd be great. Thank you. I'm done, Dennis.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Joe. And I want to take a second to thank Joe for filling in for me when I'm away. My wife and I were on a cruise last week, and Joe does a great job, steps in, and the club doesn't miss a beat. So thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate that. And for all his work with the trips committee. And I wanted to also thank Mike Donovan for the great job he did on March the 20th at that meeting in asking the photographers questions about why they took the images that they did. I finally got around to watching that recording this morning and really enjoyed it. So thanks, Mike. Okay, this evening we have what will possibly be a very interesting session, something we have not tried before, at least in this exact format. We have 5 people as panelists who are going to respond to any questions that you have. And we ask that you restrict those questions to photography related topics. And I will moderate the session and keep things rolling. And I've already told the panelists if they're, for some reason do not want to respond to a particular question, just pass on it and somebody else will, or we'll just move on. So we'll take your questions after we do the introductions here of the panelists. And I'd like you to sort of like raise your hand, if you will. I'll be able to see that in the screen. And then I'll call on people to keep it orderly. Okay, so our panelists are Elaine Shook, Eve Smith, Joe Farrell, Mark Albano, and myself. And because we have, maybe some people who aren't familiar with us personally, or some new club members who aren't familiar with us at all, I'm going to ask each panelist to take a moment to briefly introduce themselves. So Elaine, would you start things off, please?
Okay, you would pick me first.
Alphabetical order.
Alphabetical order. I have to think about that one. Okay, I can't say that I've had an illustrious career in photography. I've never been a professional, am not now, but I've been in love with photography since I got my first camera at the age of 7, and have been growing in it ever since. I am primarily a nature and wildlife photographer, but I delve into all kinds of genres, including macro, landscape, architecture, a little bit of abstracts, things of that nature. So I don't limit myself, and I'm not an expert in any one of those side fields. I do have a great emphasis on specifically florals and birds, not birds in flight, but more portrait birds. Beyond that, don't know what I can say.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's go to Eve.
Well, like Elaine, I hate to talk about myself. I don't really know, other than background wise. I have a fine arts degree in photography. I can't say that I started when I was 7 though, Elaine. I started with film. I had my own darkroom for years, kind of got addicted to that whole aspect of it in black and white film. I obviously have moved on to digital. I don't say that I would specifically shoot one kind of genre either. I love photography in all forms. Natural light is my favorite, but I do play with studio lights and such also. Got into doing a lot of abandoned buildings for quite a while. That's pretty addicting. I shoot weddings, family events. So I do portraiture, candid shots, that kind of a thing, but I could spread all over with all kinds of different genres and be happy with whatever I'm shooting at the moment. So
Thank you. Joe, your turn.
I'm Joe Farrell, and I'm the head of the trips committee, which we have 7 members that host and lead all the trips that we have at the West Shore Photography Club. And my favorite kind of photography is landscape and people in their natural environment. And I've been shooting for quite a few years, and that's it.
Thanks. Mark.
Okay, I'm Mark Albano. I've been photography off and on since my early 20s, which was a long time ago. I started in the film days. I did some darkroom stuff like Eve did, and I really liked it. I've used several different camera systems. I've used Canon, Olympus, and I'm presently using Sony. Most of my photography is, I just give it a general description of outdoor photography. I don't do much portrait work or pictures of people that much, except for I do a little bit of event photography for a couple of nonprofit organizations. I really like black and white, even though I do a lot of things in color. And I'm the Capture One user here for processing my images. So if you have any Lightroom questions, don't ask me.
Okay, thank you. And to round things out, I'm Dennis Baker, club president. After I finished up my 35-year career in public education, I started a photography business. So I did portraits and weddings for a bunch of years, have pretty much stopped doing that now. And I'm teaching photography classes at the Carlisle Arts Learning Center and the Mechanicsburg Arts Center. So that's basically it. So let's see, let's start things off. Who'd like to ask a question? Please direct it toward one particular panelist. Terry, I see a hand there. Go ahead, Terry. You'll need to unmute yourself, of course.
Dennis, when you do your macro work, do you usually use consistent light, or are you using flash?
Sort of depends on the magnification. If I'm using the regular 100 millimeter Canon lens, macro lens, and I'm outside in good light, I typically would probably go with ambient light. When I switch to the MPE 65 millimeter lens, it's a specialty lens that magnifies much more, like 1 to 5 times. You're so close and the magnification is so high and the light's so limited, it pretty much forces me to go to flash. And I found the most convenient flash is ring flash. So I have a young new ring flash that I put on the end of the lens, and that's powerful enough. You're so close, it doesn't have to be very powerful. So I very, very frequently use a ring flash.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Now, the problem I have is on my screen, I can only see half of everybody at a time. So if you put your hand
Rod
up.
has his hand up. Rod has his hand up, Dennis.
Okay, so go ahead, instead of a hand, just go ahead and say, I have a question, or.
Yes, Dennis, I have a question.
Yeah, Rod, go ahead.
It's just a general question for all the panelists. What photo editing software do you use, and why did you pick that particular one?
Okay, well, let's start in follow the same order then. Elaine, would you like to respond to that?
Yes. My primary tools are Lightroom and Photoshop, but I use a number of plugins and sometimes multiple plugins for a single image. So I use Photoshop as kind of a hub. I will import into Lightroom, then I'll move an image into Photoshop so that I can create a separate layer for each program that I'm editing in, so that I can individually adjust those or blend those as needed. Then I will save it back to Lightroom. Now, some of the plugins that I use are, some of my favorites are in the Nik collection, like Color Effects Pro or even Silver Effects Pro. I used all of the newer Topaz products like Topaz Photo AI. I haven't tried the megapixel, but once or twice yet, so I don't have a lot of experience with that one. But also the sharpening tool that they have is very good. But I use the Topaz Suite 2 for artistic images when I'm in the mood. And also Luminar has several plugins that I use that I like when I decide to use presets, like for an Orton effect. Right now I'm using Luminar 3 and Luminar Neo.
Very good. Thank you. Eve, how about you?
I edit in Lightroom and Photoshop. I pull everything, all my raws into Lightroom first. Cull them down. I usually will do, if I need to color balance, any straightening, some very basic editing in that. Then I pull my favorites out of that and put it into Photoshop and do my fine tuning. Same as Elaine, I do everything on separate layers so that I still have the background undestructed, non-destructive type of editing. Same thing, if you do it in different layers like that, each layer you can keep separated, edit each one, go back and edit it again instead of trying to delete your history and go back without having to get rid of anything you've already edited. The only plugin I do is the Nick. I love the Silver FX and the Color Effects, those two on that. Do a lot of layers, and a lot of selective layers where I'll choose a specific area in a photo, select it, and do a curve layer in through that. That's my editing process.
Okay, thanks. Joe?
I use Lightroom and Photoshop and a couple of plugins. I use the Nick Color Effects Pro, and I use the Topaz products for sharpening and for noise reduction. Recently, with the newest Lightroom masking tools that they have, I absolutely fell in love with them, and I use that for a lot of my dodging and burning. And so that means that I really then don't go that much into Photoshop as I used to.
Very good, thanks. Mark?
Yeah, when I switched to Sony, I reevaluated raw processors and I chose Capture One because I liked the way it worked with the Sony stuff the most. It has layers built in, so it lets me do some things that way. I use a couple of plugins, but mostly the Topaz Photo and the Topaz Denoise.
Okay, thanks. I use Lightroom as my home base, take images into Photoshop for some work, but similar to what Joe said, with the enhancements that have been made in Lightroom, especially in the masking panel, I find myself going into Photoshop less and less each year, I think. The plugins I use primarily I've settled down to just SnapArt 4 for artistic effects and Topaz Photo AI. So, okay, next question. And just, okay, oh, Rich, I see your hand there. Go ahead, Rich. Oh, you'll need to unmute yourself, Rich.
I got it now. Sorry.
There you go.
I got a brain now. Thanks. Over time, we all accumulate lots of old lenses that we don't use very much or at all, camera bodies and the like, whatever. So my question, I guess, for everyone is that what do you do with your old lenses? Do you just kind of pile them up somewhere and forget about them? Do you sell them? And if you sell them, have you found a source that you like rather than another? I know a number of people, photographer friends, I sell the B&H, for example, but what do you do with your old stuff besides feeling guilty as it's sitting around?
Well, I guess we'll follow the same procedure, Elaine.
Okay, well, I have just recently divested myself of several lenses because I switched from Nikon over to Olympus, and I've accumulated quite a few Olympus lenses, and no longer use the Nikon whatsoever. And I found that you can easily sell it on B&H or KEH, but you end up getting half of what they would resell it for. So I have actually tried to sell most of my things on eBay, which I found to be fairly safe, as opposed to places like the Facebook Marketplace, which I think there's a lot more scammers on that site. But I've been able to get prices that are as good as what you could buy it for on places like B&H used or KEH. I've had a lot of success there.
Okay, thanks. Eve, how about you?
I have handed mine down for quite a few years. I have a nephew that is also a photographer, and I gave him all my film cameras because he still plays with all of that. I wasn't using mine, so I gave that to him. Gave him my first Nikon DSLR and gave him my second DSLR. So, and I have two of the same Nikon bodies. So I'm okay if I have duplicate lenses because I shoot with two different cameras sometimes. So.
Okay, Joe?
First off, I do not keep old lenses. I'm not one to hoard things like that. I have no emotional attachment to a lens that's 10 years old. So, and I do sell them on like KEH. As a matter of fact, I've done recently that, and I do get a lower price, but I find I just like doing that. I sold some to B&H. I've also sold some to some of the members within the club. Sometimes we'll put a little note somewhere or at a trip, and I'll send some, I'll sell some equipment to them. So.
Okay, Mark?
Okay, well, I still have my entire Olympus film system. But when I switched to digital, I went from Canon to Sony, and when I did that, I sold all my Sony gear, and I did it through KEH, just like Joe does.
Okay, okay. I have not gotten rid of much equipment. I've not used eBay. I did sell a lens, a Canon lens 70-200 on Facebook Marketplace a couple of years ago successfully. Other than that, I sold a camera to one of the club members. But other than that, I have most of my original stuff. Didn't find much of a market for it. But yeah. Okay, next.
Dennis, can I make a comment on that? I just happened to think of it.
Sure.
Some people have had some bad luck with eBay Facebook Marketplace and eBay. If you called your police station and asked them if it would be appropriate to have that as the meeting spot for where you conducted the transaction, it really makes everybody feel a lot better.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next question.
Dennis,
Yes, Terry.
I have I'll send you a link to a gentleman I know who buys old lenses and cameras. He was out of York, I believe, but I think he bought a building over in Lancaster. I have his card. I will send you the information. He's up and up. I bought a couple of things for him myself from my old cameras that I have.
Okay, so he's in the business of used photography equipment professionally?
Oh, God, yes, he's got about 2 stories full of equipment in the building.
Okay.
Everything and anything you can think of. And
Okay.
he's still buying.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'll share that
Yep.
with members. Okay. Looking for hands. Or just call out.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
If you have an old black and white photo, and I mean old, and some of the areas are really dark, is there any way you can pull some of the information out of those dark areas, or are they is that sort of gone?
Okay, it's an old black and white print, you say?
Yeah, it's about the negative's 100 years old.
Yes, yeah, I'll field that one, and then other people can chip in if they care to do so. Because I've done quite a bit of scanning of old prints. It depends on, well, you're relying on the capabilities of your scanner.
Okay,
There are a couple of things you can do. Number one, you can scan at a higher resolution, okay, to try to get a better quality scan.
Okay.
But some scanners will also allow you to do multiple scans. It's sort of, think of it as an HDR scanning process. So it'll scan for the shadows, the highlights, and the midtones.
okay.
And then you can combine those together, but it's all in the art of scanning. Anyone else have a comment on that?
Thank you.
No.
No, nobody's jumping on that one.
Yeah. Hey, Dennis, I got a question. What brand of printers of scanners do that?
Well, I have
What
an
model?
Epson. Yeah, I know that the Epson can do it. It's a Perfection like 700 or something like that. That's one example. Anybody know of any others?
I don't.
Okay, it's the flatbed scanner, but the neat thing on these types of scanners is if you have, let's say you have slides, it has a plastic framework that you can fit 12 slides in it. It recognizes that, and then it actually scans each slide individually and adjusts for the brightness and the tones individually, one at a time. So, and one right after the other. You don't have to, take them one at a time. Okay, next question.
Dennis, Dave Marquetto here.
Yes, Dave.
Hey, folks, I just bought an Olympus 4/3 camera. I was thinking of maybe using it for street photography because of its small size. Would the panelists care to comment on what I might expect with that camera, or, what it's particularly good for, or, any tips and tricks for the new Olympus 4/3 that I've purchased?
Okay, who would like to field that question?
I can field that one because I am shooting strictly with Olympus right now. The Olympus 4/3 system has a 2 times crop factor as opposed to a 1.5 with the typical crop sensor camera. So it is particularly good for shooting wildlife because you get 2 times the reach that you would with a full frame camera. It's also very good for macro for the same reason. And it also gives you twice the depth of field that you would get with a full frame camera. So if you want a sharp photo throughout the frame, it's very easy to get that. So when you're shooting at 5.6, for example, to get more light, you're getting the equivalent of what, 11.2 in a full frame camera. So those are the types of things that I think it really excels in. I'm not a street photographer, but I have used it for travel photography and doing some, and it does very well. It's not as lightweight as a Fuji would be, but it does an excellent job with street photography.
Yeah, and I can attest to its macro capabilities by having looked at the pictures that Elaine posts on Facebook. When I got into macro and started looking at other people's work, I was impressed with the shots that she was posting. And I frequently ask her, did you focus stack that? How did you get that shot? What? It has tremendous depth of field. And I was struggling down here with focus stacking. She says, no, I just shot it with my Olympus. So some impressive macro work. Anybody else want to comment? Olympus?
Use Olympus.
Okay, good. Let's have
No,
another
thanks very
question.
much. That's helpful.
Okay.
Dennis, I have a question. This is
Yes,
Dick
Dick, I
Munson.
recognize that voice.
Periodically over the last 3 years, I've tried to get into some type of fine art people photography. I'm primarily a nature wildlife photographer living here in the woods, but get bored sometimes and try for something different. And it's something that I see our club very little display of as far as showing images. I would like to learn more about studio lighting, model photography. Possibly someone could lead an open workshop. Several of the people have said they've gotten into portraits, they do weddings. If there is any interest in this by any other club members, I'd sort of like to organize a group. They can get my email address off of the website, the club's website. My email is there. This is strictly for hobby purposes. It's for me. I'm not trying to set up a business, make any money at it. It's just something I think I would enjoy playing with. Does anybody have any comments?
Yeah, Dick, what do you mean by, what do you mean by fine art portraiture?
I have no idea how to use the studio lights that I have, and my hit and miss is hit and miss.
Okay,
I have also, I've hired at least 3 professional models in the last 3 a year in the last year, probably 9 or 10. I've been traveling down to the Baltimore area for a couple of workshops, but it's just sort of haphazard. I'd like to get something here locally. I've touched on fine art nude photography, and that's not what I'm really working at. It is of interest, but I'm frustrated with primarily the lighting,
okay.
even if it's natural lighting outdoors.
Yeah, one suggestion I have is for the studio type stuff. On Idorama TV on their YouTube page, they have a photographer named Gavin Hoey. And
Thank
almost
you.
everything he does is in the studio, and he's got a very small studio too, and he is very good with lighting and how to set it up.
Thank you.
Dick, I'll make a comment on that. The club is looking at having a studio workshop at Fine Art Photo in Lemoyne here in the summertime, and with studio lights and how to organize them and shoot and stuff like that. And Gary over there has been willing to do that kind of a workshop. It won't be until this summer, however, but we'll keep that. I mean, that's something that we're going to be doing.
Something I would sort of caution about the workshops I have been to, the best ones, I believe 12 photographers was the most I was ever at, but split up into groups of 4. And each photographer gets, let's say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes of instruction with a professional, or at least they call themselves a professional photographer, with that particular photographer and that model, and showing how to set things up. The photographer sort of decides what angle he wants to shoot at, how he wants to shoot it, and the other ones watch, and then you each get to watch what the other one is learning. If you get more than one person shooting at a time, it seems to get very cumbersome. The model gets very uptight, too much direction, not knowing what to do. But that's just an observation on my part.
Okay, well, let me make a suggestion. If you have an interest, I'm talking to everybody here. If you have an interest in learning how to use studio lights, would you indicate that in chat? Send it to me. Okay, we'll do a little survey out of 39 people, who are participating. I'll get some idea then, and I can use that to base on whether we want to go forward with something on studio lighting. So just indicate in chat if you are interested. If you're not, don't bother. Okay, next question, guys.
Hi, this is Jean.
Yes, Jean.
Hi. In answer to Dick's question, if I could get his email address, I can send him a couple examples of some of my fine art work, and see if that is what he's looking for. I mostly do children in the fine art. And if that's what he's looking for, then I'd be happy to help him.
Okay, Dick, is it
Jean,
all right if I send Jean your email address?
Yes, it is. And she should be able to get mine off of our membership list.
Okay, I will do that for you sometime this week. I'm in the middle of doing a big shoot right now. When I do my fine art, I do in studio and outdoors, both. And so like I said, I'll shoot you a couple instances of those. And then if that's what you're looking for, then I'll be happy to share any information with you that I can.
Okay. Thanks,
Also,
Gene.
along with the lighting is, I'm thinking of reflectors. I've tried several different
Yes.
types.
Yes,
Thank you.
I also use B flats and natural light and studio light and B flats and reflectors. I kind of dabble in it all.
Gene, I'm going to become a pest, I'm afraid.
That's okay. I'm happy to help. I do have a question of my own, probably mostly for Joe, because I know you do a lot of street photography. And when you were over, and were you in Vietnam? Is that what you just shared with us the other week?
Yes.
So are you submitting any of those images to competitions with people involved?
No, I am not. I do not submit them to competitions. And if you're thinking about model releases,
Yes.
that might be thinking of, I never have gotten the model release, and if I were to do that, it would ruin my photography, because first of all, I don't know the language, and I couldn't do that. But then that would just break the momentum and the interaction. So I wouldn't do that.
Right. And like even at home, you don't worry about that. I had been on a photo walk a couple years ago, and I took some really cool pictures, but there were people in it. And do you still put them on your website, or do you not even put them on your website?
No, I definitely put them on the website. If it's in a public setting, then I have no fear about putting any picture that I have. You think of a parade or a street scene, where there's 4 or 5 people, that's, to me, from what I know, that's absolutely fine to do without any model releases.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Gene, I would agree with Joe's comments. And just to add on to that, I think the only area that starts to get a little worrisome is if you were to use a picture with some people in it for a commercial purpose to try to promote some product, then model releases would be important.
But you're okay putting it on your website?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Dennis,
welcome.
if I may add a little something there. Go back about 8 years ago, I was president of the Perry County Camera Club. And we were concerned because there was a news article that someone had been arrested shooting pictures from inside their car of people at a public swimming pool. And the charges were dropped, but it raised some questions. And we invited the state police in Newport to send a representative to our camera club meeting and comment on when and where can you take pictures in public. And generally, he said, if you are standing on public property, you can take pictures of anyone. However, if you're taking pictures of children, you're taking anything that might be questionable, then the police can be called in, and it becomes a matter of intent. They will severely question you as to why are you doing it and what are you using them for? And if you're going to be selling them, then definitely you need a model release. But typically, if you're just walking down the street taking pictures of people, don't worry about it.
Yes. Thanks, Nick. Okay, other questions? Scanning the faces on my computer here. Let's see. Who's got a question? Something you just are eager to ask.
Yep, Rich Scar again.
Rich again. Okay, Rich. Sure.
How many of you presenters would have websites for your photography? I know Dennis, I've seen yours, and Joe's. I know Elaine has one as well. How many of you have a website, and how aggressive are you or involved are you in posting your photographs there? Do you go every day? Do you go every 3 months? And how many of you also then sell your photographs?
Okay, interesting question. Elaine, how about kicking things off here?
Okay, I do have a personal website, and it's probably the one that I pay the least attention to, because it gets the least exposure. I probably have not updated it for over a year. It was a website that comes free with my Adobe photography subscription. So it was easy to set up. It's not as convenient to upload as it is to Facebook. So I just don't really take the time to update it as frequently as I would like to. But I also post my photos on Instagram, which I find a rather annoying site personally. And it is kind of cumbersome uploading to that site as well. I also belong to viewbug.com, which is easier to upload, but I haven't used that one for a while either, just because of some of their marketing strategies. So at this point, I am primarily uploading most of my images to Facebook, quite truthfully, but I still have those others open.
Okay. And Elaine is referring to Adobe Portfolio, and I've used that too. So if anybody if you have this Adobe photography subscription and you're interested in establishing your own website that's part of that subscription through Adobe Portfolio, if you let me know, just email me, I can send you the instructions for help you get that set up. Okay, Eve, website.
I do have a website, and shamefully we'll have to say I have not updated it in a very long time. I used to be pretty aggressive with it, but life gets in the way, I guess. I update my Facebook much more frequently. I have a business Facebook and a personal Facebook. I used to sell prints off of my website. I've taken that option off because I've not kept up on it. Quite frankly, that's the reason. I do keyword all my images, and I copyright my images. So that's a thing to think about, especially with Facebook or what have you. If you're posting your images, anybody can still take them, but you could have some recourse if you really wanted to follow that track. If somebody uses one of your images commercially, is what I'm referring to.
So to clarify, you go through the process of copywriting them with the US government?
No, that I put my copyright on it through the metadata on my images. But I have that already built in, I guess is what I want to say. There's a word for it, I can't think of it. So that all my images already have all that in it in the metadata. So I know if I learned that through a photographer that does sell stock photography, and he has found his images all over kinds of places and had to go after them. If somebody wants to use it's one thing, but if they're going to use it commercially and make money off of it, that's where I would have a problem with that. But so I do have a website, but
who's your website with?
Smugbug.
Smugbug, okay. Yeah. And to be clear, your images are your images, whether you put a copyright notice on them or not. Okay. And people, regardless of whether you have a copyright notice on them, people can steal your images. There is a recourse that you can take by filing a form, but the effectiveness is, and you can register, you can pay and register your images with the US government, but that becomes costly if you have a lot of images and it's very laborious. But if you do have those images registered, then that gives you more authority in going after somebody who uses your photo inappropriately, and you can get a monetary recourse, supposedly. Okay, thanks, Eve. Joe, how about you?
I take a little bit different approach. I don't have my website. I do have a website. It's through Smugbug. I don't have one linked to a subscription service with anybody, so I have independence from that. I post images on my website, and they are in categories like travel, nature, that kind of a thing. And I do not, people can download any of the images, and they're pretty high resolution images. And I don't copyright on them. And I feel honored if somebody were to take one and to do something with it, or they could through SmugMug, they could order a print of it. And I know quite a few people have done that, and I can see that. And I don't participate in that revenue because frankly, it's a hobby for me and it's fun. And I feel honored if somebody took my images.
Okay, thanks. Mark?
I don't have a website, nor do I use social media personally. But I have posted my images on some of the nonprofits that I do event photography for. And if I have to get back to the street photography stuff a little bit, if I have a picture of a child in it, I will ask permission before I post it, even on the events website. And if I think it might be used for advertising the nonprofit, I will get a release.
Very good, thanks. Well, this is a pertinent question for me because I just officially closed my photography business. When I started 16 years ago after retiring from education, I made my photography business official with the state and paid, the taxes and all that sort of stuff. And my ambitions have changed. I was doing weddings and portraits for a number of years, and of course, selling my images. So I first had a website through Print Room, and they went out of business. And for years now, I've had my website with Zenfolio. I've been very happy with them, and it's set up as a storefront to not only display the images, but sell them. And everything works very smoothly. I like it a lot. And I was very active with keeping it up to date. I have a lot of images posted there from over the years. However, since I officially closed my business, since I'm not doing weddings and portraits and not, pretty much just teaching, I have been having second thoughts about paying that money. It's close to $200 a year to maintain the Zenfolio website. And I'm thinking, for what purpose? If I'm not selling my images, people aren't buying, do I really need it? How many people are looking at my images on my website, and for what purpose? Could I do it more cheaply by going through something like, Adobe Portfolio? So I'm pondering that issue right now as to whether it's really worth the money to maintain my current website. But I have been very happy with Zenfolio, and if somebody, Squarespace is the other one that I understand does a very nice job for people who are interested in selling their images. I'm not active on Instagram. As Elaine said, that format just frustrates me. I am active on many, many different groups with Facebook, and that's primarily, where I post. Yeah, Rich, that take care of your question? He fell asleep already.
The answer is yes. Sorry, I'm having a hard time. I have a little arthritis maybe or something. No, it does. I think I won't prolong this, but it's always the issue. It's always a little awkward to talk about. It's always that issue that we spend a lot of money. We really refine our skills in this area. We're really proud of what we accomplish. We admit our mistakes. We go through this whole kind of creative process. I think Elaine probably knows this. She does know this in spades, of the creative spirit of an artist and just being very satisfied with all of that. That's on one end. And then on the other end is that you really do want to share it with a lot of people, people but people that you maybe not know. And that moves you into the ego kind of thing too, and the selling. So that's the kind of nature of my question. I'm there now, I've done a lot of stuff and I've created websites before, but I'm just kind of tossing over whether, I do a lot of writing of short stories too, so I can combine them. But just that question of what do you do? I mean, each one who's here in the meeting, I'm sure has at least 15, 25,000 photos, and maybe they have them well organized, maybe not. But the question is, how do you get greater exposures so that people can really both enjoy them and maybe be encouraged to be creative? the same time, not make it a kind of a grandstanding kind of thing. So that's behind my question. Thanks for the answers.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think we're all motivated in that direction. We want to share our images and what's the most effective way to do that.
And while I'm unmuted, let me ask Joe a quick question. Joe, when you were showing your Vietnam photos, always interested is that you referred 2 or 3 times to your favorite lens, and it was something like a 70 to 200. Does that sound familiar to you, or is I making it up? Oh, you're muted.
Thank
You
you.
rescarred me. So
It's,
the reason I ask you that is that if that's true, I think I heard you say that, or maybe others can do the same thing, is, I think many of us have a preferred lens that we drop back to, even though we do it according to whether we're shooting birds or whether we're shooting people, whatever. But what is your favorite lens and that you go to lens?
My favorite lens is a 24 to 120, and that's been for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. But then the second one beyond that would be a 70 to 200 f4 lens. And it's interesting, if you have Lightroom, you can go and highlight all your pictures and then go to a filter and say, which was the most common lens I've used. I mean, you don't really say that, but that's what it does. And it'll show you how many images you have taken with each lens. And so that's what I do. So I know that those are my 2 favorite lenses. I'm going to Patagonia in next week, and I'll be taking the 24 to 120, a 14 to 30 for night sky, and I'll take a 100 to 400 for the occasional animal that I might accomplish.
Okay. Yeah, when I was doing people photography, the 70 to 200 was my go-to lens. When I'm doing sports, it's the 100 to 400. Of course, when I'm doing macro, then that's a different story. Get into the specialty macro lenses. Elaine, do you have a favorite lens?
Yes, my go-to lens is the Olympus 40 to 150, which is a full frame equivalent of 80 to 300. I use it a lot. I use it around the house. I use it when I'm out. I don't use it for birding, even though with a 2 times adapter, it could get me a pretty good reach with birds, but that's not typically the one that I would use. But it's a great lens. It's just very versatile. It does well for me.
Okay. Eve, what's your favorite lens?
I have to agree with Joe. My 24 to 120 is my go-to. It's the versatility of it, I guess. Street photography, I use a 50 millimeter, but my 24 to 120 is my go-to. And I would have to say the same thing if I check to see what lenses I use the most. It's so versatile. Yeah.
Very good. Mark?
For me, it's my 100 to 400. Like I said, most of my shooting is outdoors. I like it for landscapes. I like it for wildlife. I like it for flowers. So it's usually on my camera.
Very good. Yeah, a number of years ago, I thought it might be a good idea if I got one of those, extreme zoom range zooms to take when I travel, so I wouldn't take a number of different lenses. I wasn't happy with it. The sharpness didn't seem to be there, so I went back to my standard, bag kit of lenses. Okay, another question.
This is Judy. I have a
Okay.
question.
Yes, Judy, go ahead.
I wanted to get some insight into what photos people keep. Do you keep them all? Do you just keep the ones that you edited? You have HDR, you have 3, 5, 7 of sort of the same thing, then you have the HDR. Another thing that concerns me is some of the files get pretty large. I mean, the raw files typically for me are about 50 meg, but then I go into Photo AI and it like doubles, triples, quadruples. So I just sort of wanted to get an idea of what people keep and don't keep.
Okay, Elaine.
Well, I've been a little more discriminating over the past few years just because of the space issue, and especially because I'm doing a whole lot more continuous shooting, bursting, so to speak. And so many of those burst shots are just duplicates of each other especially if you're shooting a still subject. So I tend to cull them before I actually import them and only select those that I know that I will be using and processing rather than waste all that space in my hard drive. The ones that I do import, I very, very seldom delete them once they're imported because I do like to go back even to those ones that at one time I didn't think were worth giving a second look at, and I will find a different way to process them when I'm in a different stage in my life, and I've got new tools and new perspective, and so I don't delete anything that I don't necessarily process at that time. But I do carefully cull before I import them.
Yeah, I've heard a number of photographers say with the advancements in Lightroom and the other software programs that they sometimes go back to an image that they shot years ago. And if they shot it in RAW, which most of them are, they reprocess it and can actually make it look better than it did when it was originally shot. Eve, how about you?
I don't get rid of any of them. My process is I download them to an external hard drive, all my RAWs. So actually, I hate to say I just opened up my Anderson Mill ones tonight. I hadn't even gotten them out of the camera yet. But I take the card, I make a file on my hard drive, Anderson Mill. Under that, there's a RAW file. I download all of those. I take all those RAW files, throw them into Lightroom, do my little selective editing. I will export those to a second file under Anderson Mill, which will say Lightroom, and I export those as PSDs. So then they all go, those are all my favorites out of the RAWs. They'll go there. Then if I want to individually edit anymore, I take them into Photoshop. I make a third file under Anderson Mill, and those will be the PSDs. And then once I'm done editing all those PSDs, I then make a fourth file. I flatten the image, merge all the layers, and make JPEGs of those. Those will be the ones that might go on Facebook or what have you. So under Anderson Mill, I will have 4 different folders. So I keep all my RAWs, but I have.
That's a lot of duplication.
It's my system. It works for me. So same thing. I can go back any RAW that I want to pull back out. Even my PSDs, if I want to do anything with. I very seldom re-edit any JPEGs.
And the PSDs, you save all the layers.
I do. I do not flatten those. I just flatten them when I save them as a JPEG then. And I can grab a JPEG to throw on Facebook or web or what have you. But yeah.
Okay, let's hear
That's
from
my
you, Joe.
process.
Yeah, Joe, do you save all yours?
My process is I bring them into my hard drive via Lightroom, and it goes into a folder. We'll use the Anderson Mill example that Eve was using. They'll go into Anderson Mill. I will then look at all the images, and through a calling process, I'll give them a number 1 if it's something that's worthwhile looking at. And then I'll go back and I look at all the number 1s. Then I'll give the number 2s that I want to look at. And then I'll go back again and look at the number 2s. And then usually that would point, I'll wait a day or 2, and then I'll go back and make them 3s. And those are the ones that I'm going to process. They're all in one folder with a numbering sequence to them. Then what I do is I bring up the number 3s and I process them, and I'm done with them. Now, if I'm going to put them onto my SmugMug account, or if I'm going to share them onto like Facebook or send them to somebody, I'll then have a folder. I'll export them as a JPEG and put it in as a folder within the Anderson Mill. So I'll have all the Anderson Mill RAW files, and then I'll have the JPEG folder. And then I typically would not delete any of the images, whether they're good or bad. I just don't go through that process of deleting them. So that's
how many images do you have in your Lightroom catalog?
Well, on my, it's probably 220,000. Okay. But now keep in mind, they're not 220,000 quality images. There are a lot of bad ones in there. I just don't go through the process because I consider that this space to store them is relatively inexpensive anymore. And I can put a 12 terabyte, 18 terabyte drive on my external hard drive, and it's pretty reasonably priced. And my time is more valuable than going through and deleting them. I just don't do that.
Yeah. Mark, you save all your images?
In a word, yes. I kind of do a cross between what Joe and Eve does. Capture when I do a shoot like Anderson Mill, I'll come in and I'll create a session and capture one, load everything in there. I'll rate them. I'll take a first pass rating them, then I leave them for a couple of days, then go back and look at the rated ones again, see which ones I really want to process, and then process them and complete the processing on them. Then when I'm done with that, I import the session into my catalog.
Okay, thanks. My philosophy used to be to not delete anything. Of course, yeah, I was doing more sports and using, as Elaine said, using burst mode more often, and realized that there's a lot of images in there that I'll never use. So first of all, I import everything into Lightroom so I can pick out the best images and then sort out which ones I want to keep, which ones I want to process, which ones I want to delete. So I have a simple system of hit the P key for pick. That'll be one I'm going to process. Leave it unrated. Yeah, it just stays, or X to delete. So I go through all the images, select all the X's then and delete them, keep everything else. So I currently have over 700,000 images in my Lightroom catalog. And yeah, I'm trying to be a little more discriminating these days, but it's not easy. Okay, another question.
Hey, this is Dan. I got one.
Okay, Dan.
And I apologize. I did join late, but hopefully it's not redundant. A question about equipment. So I know as I've discussed things with seasoned experts like the panel here, routinely a common theme on the equipment answer is like, oh, hey, it doesn't matter what you got. You know, it's about composition. It's about the art of it and all that kind of stuff. And then as they say, the price of the camera and all the equipment doesn't matter, they proceed to pull out, what appears to be about $10,000, $20,000 worth of machine out of the bag. So I'm always a little suspicious. And I know in my years of photography now, is just a few into it, it seems like every time I've upgraded, I have noticed, like an improvement. But I was just curious about your guys' take on that whole adage, which again, often I hear like, it doesn't matter. But then again, I mean, it does seem to do that. So anyway, just curious about that as a topic.
Well, it's an interesting question. If you follow David Ducherman, he's constantly saying it's not the equipment, it's not the equipment.
Yeah, right.
And then you look at the equipment he has, and it is partly about the equipment. So Elaine, comments on that?
Yes, I feel pretty strongly about this subject, and I agree with David to an extent on that, in that it's not the equipment that makes you an artist. And I really think that's what he is getting at. Yes, more advanced, more high-end equipment will give you a better image, but it certainly doesn't help your creative skills. And it's not necessarily the most expensive equipment that is going to get you the image that you're looking for. It's the camera that is best suited for the type of imagery that you're looking for. So for example, the camera that I am using right now is not necessarily well suited for someone who is a landscape photographer. It just isn't. The full frame camera will do a lot better with landscape and get you a much higher quality resolution image than the camera that I'm working with. So it's more about suitability than it is about the cost or how high end that equipment is, and what your needs are.
How do you know when it's time to upgrade your camera?
Are you addressing that to me?
Yeah.
Well, again, it depends upon what your needs are. If you're looking for something that has all the latest bells and whistles and that's important to you and you don't have that on your current camera, then for you, it might be time to upgrade your equipment. If your equipment just hasn't kept up with technology, and it can't give you what you need to produce the image that you want, then it's time to upgrade your equipment. If it's your camera is just near death, then it's time to upgrade your equipment. It all depends upon your situation and what your needs are at the time.
Yeah, but I want better images, so I gotta buy a new camera.
Well, what do
I
you
mean-
mean by a better image?
Well, some people think that as you say, that the new camera is going to be the answer, and that it doesn't automatically mean that your pictures are going to be better. There's more to the process than that. Eve, your thoughts on the topic?
I have to agree with Elaine. I think each of us have our individual desires. I mean, geez, could we go out and buy a new camera every year and a better lens all the time? Lenses have a lot to do with it. The glass is important, and the care of your equipment. I would liken it to taking care of anything that you have. I mean, if you take care of a car, you're going to get a lot more mileage out of it. Your equipment's the same way. I think lenses are more important than the actual body. If you had a choice of upgrading one or the other, the glass has a lot to do with the quality of what you get, but it absolutely is user. You know, I could drive the fastest car out there. If I don't know how to drive, what good is that? You know, I'm gonna wreck it, you know? So it has to do with the use of it, taking care of it, and your artistic eye, you know, creating what you want it to create versus, I mean, look at the iPhones. I mean, every time you turn around, there's a more updated iPhone with the camera, but I think Elaine and I are using the same iPhone, and I get great images when I want to just use that. So you don't always have to get the latest, the best. It's how you use it and take care of it and what your end desire is.
Okay, thanks. Joe, what do you think?
I have, over the last couple of years, I've been downgrading my equipment, believe it or not, in a sense, not the camera bodies, but some of the lenses. For instance, I used to have all 2.8 lenses, the 24 to 70, the 14 to 24, the 70 to 200. I've now switched to using all f4 lenses rather than the f2.8, and that drives me into consumer lens range rather than the professional range. But for me, having that lightness and flexibility rather than hauling a big, 2-pound hunk of glass on the front is very valuable to me. I will buy a new camera body if it offers some of the features that I'm looking for. But generally the lenses I keep, and I've been downgrading.
Okay, Mark?
Well, it's an interesting topic, because as far as it comes to buying cameras themselves, it's when the urge strikes you, I think half the time. But there's a photographer out of Australia who does wildlife photography, and he's got some very nice gear. I mean, he's got the Canon with the 500mm f4, and he's got a Sony A1 with a 600mm f4, and every once in a while he brings out his Canon 10D and his 400mm f5.6 to show you that it ain't the equipment. And he takes some very, very good pictures with that gear too. So it's to me, it's like it's what you have, but but if you're gonna upgrade, there's got to be a reason for it. I mean, I switched to Sony because I wanted a little better autofocus system than I was getting, and I wanted mirrorless at the time, and Canon didn't have a mirrorless camera at the time. So, it's what you want and need, or feel you need. I should say feel you need, not what you need.
Yeah, that's one little quip about equipment that I found. I shoot a lot with Jan Williams of the club, whatever, because we did a children's photographic book together. We do a lot of large, and we're down in Florida about the same time. We do a lot of large bird photography. I found if you're an old guy and you put a 400mm lens on, a big booming lens, and you turn your hat backwards, everybody tells you where the birds are. You can save yourself a lot of time. People will come up to you, they first tell you where all the alligators are, but then They tell you, last week we went out and we saw all kinds of birds simply because somebody told us so. It's a
Very
value
good.
of equipment.
Very good. Okay,
If
well,
I
guys, it
may-
is about the, pardon me?
If I may offer another viewpoint on it. Another month, I'll be 79 years old and as the mirrorless cameras come out within the last couple of years, I've struggled with the idea, do I upgrade? Do I get rid of all my DSLR stuff and make one final jump before I sort of go into retirement on all this photography stuff because of old age? And I've decided not to do that. I've stayed with my DSLRs, but I've upgraded. Recently, I purchased a D850 from Nikon, refurbished, saved about almost a third on it. I figure for getting it from Nikon's being refurbished is better than buying it used from KEH or B&H distributors. And I've also done the same thing with a couple of lenses. But I've got a 400 2.8 setting in here mounted on a tripod with a gimbal head that I can't manage to carry around other than out in my backyard. But by going to a D850, I feel that the quality of image I could get with my D200 at the time I bought the 400 2.8, that image can more than be matched with a f4 lens, 400 millimeter f4, and my D850 today. And I'm willing to just level off with the equipment I have, which I feel is the upper end of the line for Nikon. And that's what I'm going to be with that for the rest of my life.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, anyone have any pressing questions? We're gonna wrap things up here. It is about 8:20. So if you have a pressing question, let me know right now. Going once, going twice. Okay, let me take this. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I understand that when you go from 2.8 to 4, you're better off shooting at 4 instead of 2.8 because your depth of field. Is that correct? Would increase when you're shooting birds?
I'll try to answer that with my experience. I have always felt that whatever lens you have, you should not use the extremes of it. Get at least one stop away. So my big point in getting a 2.8 lens is I wanted to shoot at f4 or f5.6. And over the years of shooting the wildlife that I've been shooting, 5.6 seems to be the right depth of field at the distance I'm shooting. If I focus on the animal's eye, most of the animal is very sharp. And I like the depth of field that I get, the slightly blurred background. So going down to an f4, I'm still one stop away from that bottom end.
Okay.
Okay, anybody on the panel
you.
want to comment on that? Okay, okay. Well, let me take this opportunity to thank our panelists, Elaine, Eve, Joe, and Mark. Thank you very much. It's
thank
always
you.
a challenge because we don't know what kind of questions you're going to come up with. So I appreciate the fact that the panelists were willing to accept that challenge. So thank you very much. Guys, thanks for participating. As always, this meeting it has been recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel for future viewing. So thank you very much, guys, and good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.